Welcome to a deep dive into self-sabotage. We'll be exploring Brianna Wiest's The Mountain Is You. It seems like a lot of you are really trying to understand this, and honestly, I think this book is the perfect place to start.
Oh, it really is. It gets right to the root of why we get in our own way, and it actually gives some pretty solid advice.
So I bet you're thinking self-sabotage. Isn't it just like self-hatred? But Wiest throws a bit of a curveball right away.
Yeah, the book actually argues that self-sabotage is less about hating ourselves and more about trying to, to meet those needs that we're not even really aware of.
Like there's this part of us running the show, but we don't even know it.
Exactly. It's like Wiest says, it's a coping mechanism, and it usually comes from a negative association our unconscious mind makes between reaching a goal and how we see ourselves.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Imagine you really want to be financially stable, but deep down you believe that that rich people are corrupt. You might end up, without even realizing it, sabotaging your finances because that success just doesn't sit right with your deeper beliefs.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. It's like we have these invisible forces pulling us in different directions.
It is. And this is where Wiest's big metaphor comes in, the mountain. It represents all those internal struggles, those beliefs that keep us from reaching our potential.
Yeah, I like that image. We all have our own mountains to climb, right? But instead of reaching the top, we sometimes end up stuck at the bottom in self-sabotage.
That's it. And what's interesting is that Wiest doesn't see self-sabotage as a sign of weakness. She sees it as a sign that we need to change our inner story.
So how do we even start to see these self-sabotaging behaviors? They can be pretty subtle, right?
Absolutely. Wiest actually lays out some common ones, and, you might find yourself relating to them. Have you ever found yourself in unhealthy relationships that just keep repeating the same old hurts?
Oh, yeah. I think we've all been there. It's like we're drawn to what's familiar, even if it's not good for us.
Exactly. That's a classic example. Another one is, pushing for perfection so much that you end up putting things off and getting nothing done.
Or maybe focusing on being busy instead of taking real action towards our goals.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
And then there's downplaying our wins because we're afraid of what people will think. It's like we're afraid to stand out too much.
Okay, those are all hitting a little close to home. Why do we do this stuff? What's really behind it?
Wiest gets into this, saying that it's often all those emotions we haven't dealt with that fuel self-sabotage. Things like resistance, anger, sadness, guilt, embarrassment, resentment, regret, even constant fear, they can all get stuck inside and come out in these unhealthy ways.
That's a long list. Sounds pretty draining emotionally.
It can be, but here's the good news. Noticing those emotions is the first step to processing them and letting them go. Wiest doesn't say we should ignore or push down these feelings, but about giving ourselves space to feel them fully so they don't control us.
So how do we untangle ourselves from the past? It feels like our past experiences, especially the painful ones, really play a big part in this self-sabotage cycle.
Yeah, you're right. Wiest says you can't just, force yourself to forget the past. You have to build a new life, a fulfilling one that overshadows those old patterns.
That sounds easier said than done. What does that even look like?
It does take effort, but it's possible. One thing Wiest suggests is connecting with your inner child. That part of you that might still be holding on to those old hurts and beliefs.
So offering guidance and reassurance to that younger version of ourselves?
Exactly. It's about rewriting the story, giving a different perspective to those past experiences, and showing that younger self that they are loved, worthy, and capable.
That's such a powerful idea. So if untangling from the past is one part, what about building a new future? How do we even start to imagine that when we're so stuck in these old ways?
This is where Wiest's advice gets really interesting. She says to start by picturing your ideal future self. Imagine yourself a few years down the road, living the life you truly want. What's that person like? How do they act? What are their habits?
So it's like we're reverse engineering a better life by learning from our future selves.
That's the idea. And a big part of building this new future is dealing with any trauma that might be feeding those self-sabotaging behaviors.
That makes sense. Trauma can make us feel like we're always waiting for something bad to happen,
Yeah.
Makes it hard to move forward with confidence.
For sure. Creating a sense of stability inside and out is so important for moving forward. Wiest suggests things like meditation and self-soothing techniques to help with that.
And would that also mean consciously creating safety in those areas where the trauma happened? For example, if a past relationship was traumatic, focusing on building healthy, supportive relationships now.
Exactly. It's all about rewiring those automatic responses, those patterns that don't serve us anymore.
So this whole journey is about developing emotional intelligence and mental strength.
Absolutely. It's a big part of understanding and managing our emotions in a healthier way. Wiest talks about the importance of planning, practicing humility, asking for help when we need it, taking responsibility for our actions, and focusing on solutions instead of getting stuck on problems.
So shifting from like reacting all the time to being more proactive.
That's it. And ultimately finding that inner peace that lets us, handle life's ups and downs with a bit more grace.
That inner peace sounds amazing. But is it really possible with all the stress and pressure we face?
Wiest believes it is. She says that inner peace is actually more lasting than happiness. Happiness can be so fleeting and dependent on things outside of us.
So it's about finding contentment and stability no matter what's going on around us.
Exactly. It's about aligning our goals with inner peace, not chasing external validation. It's about letting go of worry and recognizing that our feelings are, they're guides, not facts.
It sounds like a lot of inner work, a lot of self-reflection and conscious effort.
It is, but it's the most worthwhile work you can do. It leads to a more fulfilling, authentic life where self-sabotage doesn't have such a grip on you.
This is also fascinating, but I'm curious, how do we turn all this into actually living a more fulfilling life? What are the concrete steps?
That's a great question, and that's exactly what we'll dive into in part 2 of this deep dive.
Can't wait. I'm already feeling inspired to tackle my own mountain of self-sabotage.
Me too.
Yeah.
Stay tuned, because Wiest has some powerful tools to help us all reach the summit.
So in part 1, we really got into what self-sabotage is all about and how it's not really about, hating ourselves, but more about those unmet needs that can lead us down some pretty tricky paths.
Yeah, exactly. And we talked about how those needs often come from those early experiences, those relationships that shaped how we see ourselves and the world.
Right. And we even touched on how emotional intelligence and mental strength are kind of the keys to breaking free from self-sabotage and living a life where it doesn't have so much control over us.
For sure. Those are essential. But I'm really excited to get into the practical stuff now. Like, how do we actually start living a more fulfilling life, a life where we're not constantly tripping ourselves up?
Yes. Wiest does give some really specific advice, and I think a lot of it's going to resonate with our listeners.
She does. And she breaks it down into a few key areas. One that really stood out to me is this idea of cultivating presence in the moment. It sounds simple, but it can be a real challenge in our crazy busy world.
Oh, I totally get that. With social media and all the notifications, it's like we're always, plugged in, always thinking about the next thing.
Exactly. And Wiest argues that all this mental chatter, this inability to really be present, actually fuels self-sabotage. It keeps us from connecting with ourselves, with what we need, and with the joy that's available to us right now.
So what's the antidote? How do we cultivate presence when our minds are always like racing a mile a minute?
We suggest a few things, and one she talks about a lot is meditation. Now, before you're like, not meditation again, hear me out. She presents it in a way that's really accessible, even for people who aren't, totally into it.
Okay, I'm listening.
Yeah.
What's her take on meditation?
She sees it as a way to train the mind, like it's a muscle. It's about creating some space between our thoughts, learning to observe them without getting, swept away. And the more we practice this, the easier it gets to access that stillness, that inner peace, even in the middle of all the craziness.
So it's not about like emptying our minds completely, which always seemed impossible to me, but about learning to manage that constant stream of thoughts.
Exactly. And she has some simple techniques to get started. Even a few minutes a day can make a difference. It's about creating that pause, that intentional space to reconnect with yourself.
I love that. It's like hitting the reset button on our minds, a little bit of calm in the middle of the storm.
That's a great way to put it. And along with meditation, Wiest also talks about the importance of nurturing positive relationships. That's another area where self-sabotage can really show up.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think we've all experienced those relationships that they drain our energy, leave us feeling like depleted and insecure.
And those relationships can actually contribute to those self-sabotaging behaviors. Wiest talks about how our relationships can either, support our growth or hold us back. And it's up to us to choose wisely, to surround ourselves with people who lift us up, who inspire us, who believe in us.
Yeah, it's like we become a reflection of the company we keep. If we're always around negativity or drama, it's going to seep into our own lives.
Exactly. And on the other hand, when we focus on those relationships that bring us joy and support and a sense of belonging, well, it can be really powerful. It's like having a whole team of cheerleaders in our corner, reminding us of our strengths and helping us, through those tough times.
So part of overcoming self-sabotage is about taking stock of our relationships and making sure they fit with our goals and values.
Absolutely. It's about being intentional with our connections, making sure they're adding to our lives, not taking away from them. And it's also about showing up authentically in those relationships. Which brings us to another important piece of advice from Wiest.
Okay, I'm ready for it.
Yeah.
What's next on the path to self-mastery?
Embracing our true selves. This is a big one. And it's often where self-sabotage starts. When we're not living in alignment with who we really are, it creates this tension that can come out in all sorts of unhealthy behaviors.
It's like we're trying to fit into a box that doesn't really suit us. And it just creates this constant feeling of discomfort.
Exactly. And Wiest encourages us to really explore our values, our passions, our unique gifts, and then to have the courage to express them authentically.
I love that. But it's one thing to know who we are, and it's another thing to actually live it out. I think a lot of people struggle with the how of showing up authentically, especially when it feels like we're going against the grain or risking judgment.
You're right, and Wiest gets that. She talks about how the fear of judgment, the fear of rejection, can be a huge roadblock. But she also offers some really powerful reframes to help us move through that fear.
Like what? What's one of those reframes?
One that really stuck with me is the idea that our true selves are inherently worthy of love and acceptance. She reminds us that we don't have to, earn our worth. We're already enough just as we are. And when we start to believe that, it becomes easier to show up authentically, even when it feels, a little scary.
That's a big shift in perspective. It's like we're giving ourselves permission to be who we are without needing anyone else's approval.
Exactly. And another reframe she offers is that, judgment is often more about the person judging than it is about us. People project their own insecurities and fears onto others. So when we experience judgment, it's often a reflection of their inner world, not ours.
That's a good reminder. It's easy to take judgment personally, but when we see it like that, it loses some of its power.
For sure. And Wiest also says to remember that not everyone's going to like us, and that's okay. We can't please everyone, and trying to will just lead to burnout and resentment. It's about connecting with the people who get us, who appreciate us for who we are.
So authenticity isn't about getting everyone to approve of us. It's about being true to ourselves and letting the right people into our lives.
Exactly. And that leads us to another area where authenticity is important, setting boundaries. This is another crucial part of overcoming self-sabotage and creating a more fulfilling life.
Boundaries. I've been hearing so much about boundaries lately. But I'll admit, I'm still not totally clear on what healthy boundaries actually look like, in real life.
Yeah, I get it. Boundaries can be tricky, especially if we're not, used to setting them. But Wiest has a really clear and empowering perspective on what they are and why they matter.
Okay, tell me more.
She sees boundaries as a way to honor our needs, our values, and our energy. It's about recognizing what we're willing to accept and what we're not. And then communicating those limits in a way that's both, clear and kind.
So it's not about being selfish or controlling. It's about protecting our own well-being.
Exactly. It's about creating a safe space for ourselves, physically, emotionally, and mentally. And when we have those strong boundaries, we're less likely to fall into those self-sabotaging patterns because we're not constantly depleting ourselves by saying yes to things that don't align with our values.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all fits together. Authenticity, boundaries, presence, they're all connected.
They are. And another piece of the puzzle that Wiest talks about is self-care. It's often seen as a luxury, but she says it's essential for overcoming self-sabotage and creating a fulfilling life.
Self-care. I love the idea, but sometimes it feels like just another thing to add to my to-do list. How does Wiest approach self-care in a way that feels, manageable?
That's a great question, and her perspective is really refreshing. She doesn't say we need to have spa days or super elaborate routines. Instead, she encourages us to find small, simple ways to nourish ourselves every day.
Like what? What are some examples?
It could be as simple as, taking a few minutes to read something you enjoy, or going for a walk in nature, listening to music that lifts you up, taking a bath, or just spending time with loved ones who fill you up. It's about those little acts of kindness and nourishment that you can fit into your day.
Yeah, it's about making self-care a part of our lives, not another chore to check off the list.
Exactly. And she also talks about the importance of giving ourselves permission to rest. In our culture, being busy is often seen as a good thing, but Wiest argues that rest is just as important as work, if not more so.
So it's about challenging that always-on mentality and embracing stillness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Rest gives our bodies and minds a chance to, recharge, to process things, to connect with our inner wisdom. And when we're well rested, we're less likely to fall into those self-sabotaging patterns because we have more clarity, energy, and resilience.
Okay, so we've covered a lot here. Presence, relationships, authenticity, boundaries, self-care.
Yeah.
I feel like these are all key pieces.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, how do we tie it all together? Is there an overarching framework that can help us, navigate this journey of overcoming self-sabotage?
That's a great question. And that's exactly what Wiest offers in the next section of the book.
Yeah.
She introduces this really powerful concept called the integrity alignment. It's basically a framework for making choices that are in alignment with our authentic selves. And it's really the key to breaking free from those self-sabotaging patterns.
The integrity alignment. That sounds really interesting. Tell me more about how it works. It feels like the missing piece.
It really is. Well, that's what we'll dig into in part 3 of our deep dive. So stay tuned, because this is where things get really exciting.
I can't wait. I'm already feeling inspired and ready to tackle my own mountain of self-sabotage.
Yeah.
All right, so we've spent the last couple parts of this deep dive really digging into self-sabotage, right? We've uncovered those sneaky ways it shows up, those kind of hidden forces behind our actions, and even explored some practical ways to be more present, nurture those authentic connections, and prioritize self-care.
It has been a journey, and you've probably started to see some of these patterns in your own life, right? But now I'm excited to share what Wiest calls the path from self-sabotage to self-mastery.
Oh, that sounds a little intimidating.
Yeah.
But I'm up for the challenge.
It's definitely a journey, not a race, and Wiest makes it feel possible. She says it starts with understanding the difference between controlling our emotions and suppressing them.
So it's not about denying or ignoring those tough feelings, but learning to handle them in a healthier way.
Exactly. She points out that emotional suppression is just a temporary fix, and it often backfires, leading to even bigger emotional outbursts down the road. It's she says, it's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. It's going to pop up eventually.
Yeah.
And with even more force.
That's such a good analogy. It makes total sense. So how do we move from suppression to healthy management?
This is where mental strength comes in. Wiest compares it to physical strength.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about being, stoic or emotionless. It's about having the resilience to handle challenges, effectively.
So being able to bend without breaking, to adapt and learn from those tough experiences.
Exactly. And she says that mental strength isn't about brute force, but about developing a deep sense of inner peace.
Inner peace, that calm in the middle of the storm. We all want that, right? But how do we cultivate that when it feels like life's always throwing us curveballs?
Wiest describes it so well in the book. She says that inner peace is the understanding that no matter what is happening around you, there's a place of total knowing and calmness within you.
It's like that invincible summer Camus wrote about, existing even in the depths of winter.
That's beautiful. And she reminds us that inner peace isn't, a destination. It's a way of being. It's not about achieving perfect happiness, but about finding that contentment regardless of what's happening around us.
So it's about letting go of those attachments to specific outcomes or expectations and finding joy in the present moment.
Exactly. And to cultivate that inner peace, she suggests setting, aligned goals that are in harmony with our values and our desire for inner peace, not just chasing external validation.
So it's about asking ourselves, does this goal contribute to my overall well-being? Not, will this goal impress other people?
That's a great way to put it. And she also talks about the importance of detaching from worry, recognizing that our feelings are guides, not facts. Our minds often jump to those worst case scenarios, which can create so much unnecessary stress and anxiety.
It's like that saying, worrying is like paying interest on a debt you may never owe.
Exactly. And to help us build that mental strength and cultivate inner peace, Wiest outlines some practical steps. One of the most important ones is planning.
Planning. That sounds a little, I don't know, a little unromantic for a journey of self-discovery.
Yeah, I know, right? But listen, Wiest says that mentally strong people are planners. They think ahead, they prepare, they do what's best for the long-term outcome. It's not about controlling every little thing, but about having a vision and taking intentional steps toward it.
So moving from reacting to being more proactive.
Yes. And she also encourages us to practice humility, recognizing that, it's not all about us. Letting go of that need to be the center of attention opens us up to a wider perspective.
And she says it's okay to ask for help, right? We don't have all the answers, and asking for support is a sign of strength, not weakness.
Absolutely. And another crucial step is taking responsibility for our outcomes.
Yeah.
Both the successes and the failures. Owning our choices gives us the power to create change.
It's about shifting from like a victim mentality to one of empowerment.
Exactly. And finally, she encourages us to focus on solutions, not on dwelling on past mistakes, right? We can learn from those experiences and then use that energy to create a better future.
Okay, I'm really liking these practical steps. Feels like we're building a toolkit for self-mastery.
We are. And now remember that concept Wiest talked about, the integrity alignment. It's basically a compass for navigating those tricky situations where, self-sabotage tends to pop up.
Yes. Tell me more about how it works. It sounds like the missing piece.
It is. Wiest says that living in integrity means making choices that align with our deepest values, even when it's, difficult or inconvenient.
So it's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Yeah.
Actually living out our values.
Exactly. It's about asking ourselves, does this choice reflect who I truly am and what I stand for? And if the answer is no, well, it might be a sign that we're veering off course.
That's so helpful. It's like having a built-in guidance system to help us stay true to ourselves.
It is. And Wiest emphasizes that aligning with our integrity might not always feel good in the moment. Sometimes it means making those tough choices, setting boundaries, speaking our truth, even when it's uncomfortable.
It's about having the courage to do what's right, even when it's hard.
Exactly. And here's the beautiful thing. When we consistently make choices from a place of integrity, it creates this ripple effect in our lives. We attract people who get us, who resonate with our true selves. We create opportunities that fit with our values, and we experience a deeper sense of fulfillment and purpose.
It's like we're building a life that feels true and meaningful.
Exactly. And Wiest reminds us that living in integrity doesn't mean being perfect, right? We're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to stumble along the way. But the key is to keep coming back to our values, to keep learning and growing.
It's about progress, not perfection.
I love that. And I think that's a perfect place to wrap things up. This deep dive has explored so much about self-sabotage, those hidden patterns and those empowering solutions. But ultimately, it's about remembering that you have the power to choose the life you want, to break free from those self-sabotaging patterns and create a future that aligns with your deepest values.
This has been such an insightful journey. It feels like we've given our listeners a whole new set of tools for navigating those tricky mountains of self-sabotage.
And remember, you're not alone in this. We all have our own mountains to climb, our own paths to forge.
This deep dive has hopefully given you some tools and insights to start climbing your own mountain. Remember, the summit is within reach, one step at a time.
And as Brianna Wiest says, the mountain that stands in front of you is the calling of your life. So go climb it.